Let's turn our attention to the SEC, where you might have heard Alabama beat Auburn the other night to improve to 5-1 in the league. So we got a first-place tie in the SEC. Alabama's 5-1, Auburn's 5-1, tied for first, top the league standings. After that, it's Tennessee at 4-1, then Kentucky, South Carolina, and Georgia at 4-2. Deadleg, remind me who you picked in the SEC in the preseason. I know it wasn't Arkansas, and congrats on that. And then tell me, would you change your pick right now?
Well, I would change my pick. Do you genuinely not remember?
I think it was Texas A&M.
It was Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Texas A&M. Let's do a little drive-by right here with Buzz Williams' team. They're 3-3 in the conference, 42nd at Ken Palm, 12-7 in overall, 3-1-3 of the past 4. The one loss was at Arkansas. I would obviously change my pick. SEC right now ranks 3rd in power conference strength overall. Big 12 obviously is course number 1. Big East sits there at number 2, and then you've got the SEC, which is good at the top. We got some weirdness down at the bottom, but we're not going to talk about those teams because they're not that good. Right now, I'd lean Tennessee, and I think you're probably going to agree with me. Here's why I can't make the case for any of the others. Auburn 16-3, 5-1, tied atop the league standings, obviously with Bama, as you mentioned. Just super weird that they are 16-3 in a top 3 conference and are going into the final week of January and don't have a quad 1 win. Just bizarre stuff. Good team, unquestionably, and working its way to a comfortable tournament seed. Gonna have to be a quad 1 opponent eventually here, Bruce Pearl's team. I'm just not going to take them to win the league because of that. Bama, 13-6, also 5-1, still rates as a top 10 team in multiple predictive metrics. Offense is really, really good. It has lost against a lot of high-end teams that finally, by way of beating an Auburn team that does not have a quad 1 win, finally got its first win over a top 10 level team. Really, you can even expand it beyond that from a metric standpoint. It was Bama's first win over a top 25 team this season, and they got it at home in a tightly contested matchup. And then Kentucky, defensive issues obviously are major. Tennessee just much more reliable there, while also having a fairly respectable offense this season. So those are your top 4 in whatever order you want to organize them. Tennessee, Bama, Auburn, Kentucky. I would lean Tennessee right now, but we are at a point here where it's those 4. You can, if you really want to draw the line and say, actually, Kentucky's a notch below because of the defense, I think you have a case. And then there's a significant drop-off in the conference there. And then you get into who's going to wind up emerging and be, like South Carolina, record-wise, it's there. Efficiency-wise, it's not, but it's probably there. You've got Florida that's in that conversation. Maybe A&M can pick up the slack. Mississippi State. Those are your teams after that. And then Ole Miss as well, because it's got a gaudy record, but its metrics aren't great. Those are the teams that are going to be vying to get into the tournament. Eventually, you might see 2 of those teams break through.
So in the top 25-1, I've got Tennessee at number 4. Let me see what happened after Arizona lost last night. Yeah, I've got Auburn up to number 10. I've got Kentucky at 19, Alabama at 25, and I've got South Carolina at 26. And you're right, the efficiency numbers aren't good. The computer numbers, broadly speaking, aren't good, although the strength of record. What do you think South Carolina's strength of record is right now?
Because of the records, it's probably, I'm going to say South Carolina is probably like top 15 in strength of record. If it's not, it would surprise me.
We're going to put that down as an incorrect answer.
Not
South
top
Carolina,
15.
16.
Okay, there we go.
16. But if you just do blind resume on South Carolina, 2-2 in quadrant 1, they're 4-0 in quadrant 2, so that would make them 6-2 in the first 2 quadrants, 4 games above 500 in the first 2 quadrants with 1 quadrant 3 loss. That's borderline top 25-1-ish. I've got them in there at this point. I'm just going to respect. I mean, it's January 26th. At some point, I'm just going to respect the resume and what you're doing in quad 1 and what you're doing in quad 2. South Carolina's solid. I do stop short, I think, of putting them in the top tier of the SEC. But I do think that's a legitimate top 30-ish team. I've got them in the top 25-1 right now. Hey, trivia time. You mentioned Auburn has 0 quadrant 1 wins. Who leads the SEC in quadrant 1 wins? Who has more than anybody else?
Feels a little tricky. It's not. If it's, I'm gonna give you the answer. I'm just gonna talk it out loud here. If it's Bama, that will stun me. I'm gonna say, and Kentucky's got. I'm gonna say Tennessee, but it doesn't feel like it's one of those four.
Tennessee has 3 quadrant 1 wins. That is not leading the SEC. At this time yesterday, it was actually Texas A&M with 4.
Look at that.
But something changed over the night. I just noticed
that net'll fluctuate on you.
That net will fluctuate on you.
That's the thing about arbitrary cutoffs, and why quad 1, quad 2 wins. As a reminder to our audience, while they are a compass, they are far from flawless. Because when you have arbitrary cutoffs and they can just flip like that overnight, not the absolute best system.
No, I was talking to my buddy Ian Furness last night. He's a Washington State guy, does TV and radio in Seattle, and like I think Washington State beat Utah. And Utah was like 29th in the net. So it was a quad 1 win. But when it updated the next morning, Utah dropped outside of the top 30 of the net. So it was actually a quad 2. At the time you got it, it was quad 1. By the time you woke up the next morning, it was a quad 2. Something happened overnight. Alabama does now have 4 quadrant 1 wins as well. So it's Alabama and Texas A&M leading the SEC in quadrant 1 wins. I would go with Tennessee to win the league. I think that's the best team in the league right now. They're 3-4 in quadrant 1, 5-0 in quadrant 2. So 8-4 in the first 2 quadrants. All 4 losses are in quadrant 1. Wins over Wisconsin, Illinois, Alabama. All 4 losses, not only in quadrant 1, but to teams in the top 45 of the net. I think that's where I would lean toward future SEC champ, but I'm not ruling out Alabama or Auburn. Those computer numbers are hard to ignore because even if the resume doesn't suggest what the computer numbers are suggesting, the computer numbers are suggesting like national championship contender.
Yeah, I got 2 more for you here. One, we did a dribble handoff this week on just projecting out Kentucky's rest of the season. We did this one a year ago. Shouts to KB, Kyle Boone, who in retrospect, I went back and looked. He almost nailed it perfectly in terms of conference record, overall record, and how they'd fare in the tournament. This year, I actually have Kentucky only losing 4 more league games. So I have them right now. UK is 4-2. I have them going 12-6 in the conference. I actually think the schedule sets up for them relatively favorably. I just don't think that 12-6 is going to win the SEC. I think the winner of that league is coming out with 5 or fewer victories. Kentucky could actually maybe, but like it can't lose on Saturday, that kind of thing. Maybe get out of there with 5 if it can fix its defensive issues. Just keep an eye there. And then obviously there's a couple intriguing SEC games. We'll get to that later in the show.
What Kentucky is starting to strike me as is the type of team that they're going to lose a game here or there that make you go, why are they losing that game? And then they're going to get in the tournament and they're going to be dangerous regardless of what seed they are. You remember the team that beat Fred VanVleet and Ron Baker in this round of 32, I believe it was in St. Louis, as an 8 seed. Wichita State was a 1, and Kentucky got an 8. And then you got into this situation where I think it was like undefeated Wichita State against 8 seed Kentucky. But man, Kentucky had the better players, and that was going to be pretty clear from the jump. I think this is going to be one of those deals. I don't think Kentucky's going to get an 8 seed, but I could see something like a 4 or a 5 seed rather than a 1 or a 2. And you look at that team going into the NCAA tournament, you go, if you're trying to find a 4 or a 5 seed that can make the Final Four, it might be John Calipari's team. Because I still think they have a lot of questions, but they have more excellent basketball players, more super talented basketball players than anybody else. That might not be enough to win a national championship or even go to a Final Four, but I still think that's true.